Welcome to Case Files HQ, where the past whispers its darkest secrets through the rustle of old files and the echo of unanswered questions. Tonight we embark on a journey into the abyss, a case that will test your resolve and linger in your thoughts long after the lights dim. It's July 22nd, 1991, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, a city known for its breweries and blue-collar charm. Yet on this humid summer night, it became the stage for a horror story etched in infamy. Police officers, responding to a routine disturbance call, stepped into apartment 213 at 924 North 25th Street, unprepared for the nightmare that awaited. A human head stared back from the refrigerator, its lifeless eyes a silent accusation. Photographs of dismembered bodies were pinned to the walls like macabre artwork, and at the center of it all stood Jeffrey Dahmer, eerily calm, almost welcoming, as if hosting a dinner party from hell. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll peel back the first layer of this cannibal killer's life, his origins, his quiet descent, and the first blood that stained his hands. Lock your doors, dim the lights, and prepare yourself. This investigation is about to begin. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21st, 1960, in Milwaukee, a city of industry and tradition, an unlikely cradle for a monster who would one day shake the world. His early years seemed ordinary on the surface, a snapshot of mid-century American life. His father, Lionel, was a chemist, a man of intellect and curiosity, often bringing home experiments to share with his young son. Dissecting frogs or examining animal skeletons, Lionel unknowingly nurtured a fascination that would twist into something sinister. His mother, Joyce, was a different story, a woman wrestling with her own demons, her mental health a fragile thread that unraveled with each passing year. Frequent hospitalizations left Jeffrey alone in a house that grew colder, its silence a breeding ground for his isolation. By age 6, a double hernia surgery marked a turning point. His once bright smiles faded, replaced by a withdrawn stare that unsettled those around him. Neighbors recall a boy who'd sit for hours in the backyard, watching dead squirrels rot under the summer sun, collecting their tiny skulls in a shoebox hidden beneath his bed. This wasn't the curiosity of a child learning about nature. It was the shadow of a killer forming, a quiet obsession taking root. As Dahmer grew, so did the cracks in his world. The 1960s gave way to the turbulent 70s, and his parents' marriage began to fray. Arguments echoed through their Bath Township home, a cacophony of blame and despair that filled the air with tension. Joyce's mental struggles intensified. Prescription pills piled up, her moods swinging from despair to rage, while Lionel, focused on his career, withdrew into his laboratory of chemicals and equations. By 1978, the divorce was final, a legal severing that left Jeffrey, now 18, adrift in a world that offered no anchor. High school became a blur of alcohol and isolation. Teachers noted his strange behavior, his eyes glazing over during lessons as he sketched dead animals in the margins of his notebooks. He'd disappear into the woods near his home, dissecting roadkill with a pocket knife, preserving animal heads in formaldehyde he pilfered from biology class. Friends? Not to speak of. One classmate, a shy girl named Sarah who sat behind him, recalled him staring at a dead cat for hours during a school trip, muttering to himself about its peaceful state. She thought it odd, but said nothing, a silence that would later haunt her. Psychologists later speculated this was the incubation period for a killer. Years of neglect, a fractured family, and an obsession with death brewing into something unstoppable. What turned this quiet boy into a predator? Was it the surgery that silenced him, the divorce that abandoned him, or the seeds his father unknowingly planted? June 18th, 1978, Dahmer's first kill, a moment that would mark the birth of a serial killer. At 18, he lured Stephen Hicks, a 19-year-old hitchhiker with a guitar slung over his shoulder and a smile that promised adventure, to his family home. The house stood empty, his mother and father long gone to their separate lives, leaving Jeffrey as its sole occupant. They drank beer in the basement, the clink of bottles a temporary camaraderie, laughing about music and the open road. Then, as the night deepened, Dahmer struck. A dumbbell, heavy and cold, came down on Hicks' head, the crack echoing in the concrete room. Panic set in. Dahmer later described the rush of adrenaline, the fear of discovery. He dragged the body to the garage, dismembered it with a handsaw over hours, the blade catching on bone, blood pooling on the floor. He buried the pieces in the backyard under the cover of night, scattering the bones with a shovel, thinking he'd erased his sin. Police never suspected, chalking up his odd behavior to teenage rebellion when they visited months later about a noise complaint. This wasn't a one-off mistake. It was the birth of a predator, a monster learning his craft in the quiet of a suburban night. Neighbors later admitted to odd smells wafting from the yard, but no one connected the dots. His mother, visiting briefly, noticed his withdrawn state but attributed it to the divorce. His father, focused on his new life, missed the signs entirely. This was the shadow beginning to cast its first dark outline. A predator honing his skills, waiting for the next opportunity to strike. But let's pause here, investigators. Consider the signs, the silent child, the dead animals, the fractured home. Could this have been stopped? Were there voices in the community, whispers among teachers, that should have raised alarms? As we dig deeper, we'll see how these early shadows grew into a nightmare that would grip a nation. For now, let this first chapter sink in. The shadow begins, and the blood has just begun to flow. Where the shadows of the past grow longer with each turn of the page. Last time, we witnessed the birth of a monster. Jeffrey Dahmer's first kill of Stephen Hicks in 1978, a moment that marked the awakening of the cannibal killer. Tonight, we delve into the quiet years, the 1980s drift that shaped the man behind the madness. This is a period of silence, of a predator honing his craft in the shadows, a time when the world turned a blind eye to the storm brewing within. Prepare yourselves, investigators, as we trace the steps from a troubled youth to a calculated killer. The years following Hicks' murder were a quiet storm, a prelude to the chaos that would soon engulf Milwaukee. Jeffrey Dahmer, now 19, stumbled through the wreckage of his high school years, his grades slipping under a haze of beer and self-loathing. The divorce of his parents in 1978 left him in an empty house in Bath Township, Ohio, a cavernous space where the echoes of his isolation reverberated. With no guidance, he turned to alcohol, a bottle becoming his closest companion, its amber liquid a temporary escape from the voices in his head. At 19, he enlisted in the Army, a desperate bid for structure, but his drinking led to a dishonorable discharge in 1981 after just 2 years. Incidents of intoxication and poor performance staining his record. Odd jobs followed. Chocolate factory worker, mixer at a blood plasma center. Each a mask for the chaos within, a facade to hide the monster growing stronger with every passing day. In 1982, Dahmer returned to Milwaukee, a city that would soon bear the weight of his crimes. He lived with his grandmother, Catherine, in West Allis, a suburban haven that offered a temporary reprieve. Catherine noticed his odd habits, late nights, strange smells from the garage, but attributed them to his unsettled life. During this time, he worked at the Ambrosia Chocolate Factory, the scent of cocoa masking the darker odors he brought home. A 1986 arrest for public intoxication was a minor blip, dismissed as youthful excess by a judge who saw a lost soul rather than a predator. His family, scattered and distant, had no inkling of the storm brewing. Lionel remarried. Joyce moved to Wisconsin, and Jeffrey was left to his own devices, a lone wolf in a world that didn't care to look closer. Then, in September 1987, Dahmer checked into the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee, a transient stop that would mark his return to killing. There, he met Stephen Twomey, 25, a quiet man with a kind smile and a love for late-night conversations. They drank in the dimly lit room, the clink of bottles a temporary camaraderie, until Dahmer's rage took over. In a drunken fury, he beat Twomey to death with his fists, the room spinning with violence, blood staining the carpet. Waking to a corpse, he panicked, dismembered the body in the bathroom with a borrowed saw, the blade catching on bone, and disposed of it in a dumpster, the act cloaked by the city's anonymity. This wasn't a repeat of Hicks. It was evolution, a step toward the methodical killer he'd become. Psychologists later noted a shift. Dahmer's need for control was growing, his inhibitions fading with each kill, his mind racing with fantasies of death. But let's pause here, investigators. Consider the quiet years, the Army's failure, the grandmother's ignorance, the city's indifference. Could these have been turning points? As we dig deeper, we'll see how these moments built the foundation for the horrors to come. Stay tuned next, where the apartment of horrors takes shape. Until then, keep your eyes open and your mind sharp. As we leave the dumpster behind the Ambassador Hotel, where Jeffrey Dahmer disposed of Stephen Twomey's remains, the air at Case Files HQ grows heavier with the scent of impending doom. As we transition from the quiet years to the heart of darkness, the apartment of horrors, where Dahmer's killing spree took root from 1988 to 1990. This cramped Milwaukee flat became his laboratory, his sanctuary, and his slaughterhouse, a place where the cannibal killer refined his craft with chilling precision. Let's step inside together, piecing together the early murders that built his reign of terror, a chapter that will test your resolve. In 1988, Jeffrey Dahmer rented apartment 213 at 924 North 25th Street, a nondescript building in a rough part of Milwaukee that would transform into a house of horrors under his hands. This cramped space, with its peeling paint, flickering lights, and thin walls that carried every sound, was where his routine crystallized. Lure, drug, kill. His first victim in this lair was James Doc Stater, a 14-year-old runaway with dreams of escaping his troubled life, tempted with a $50 offer for posed photos that promised a quick buck. Drugged with sleeping pills crushed into a soda, his young body succumbed to strangulation in the bedroom, the act carried out with a methodical calm that belied Dahmer's inner turmoil. He then dismembered the corpse in the bathtub, the water turning red as he worked with a handsaw, keeping the skull as a trophy, a grim memento stored on a shelf above his bed, a silent witness to his growing collection. Next came Richard Guerrero, 25, a kind-hearted man known for his gentle nature, lured in March 1988 with the same false promises. His body was dissolved in a 57-gallon drum of acid, the fumes seeping through the walls, a silent testament to the decay within, the chemical stench a constant companion to the neighbors who lived unaware. The apartment became a microcosm of Dahmer's mind, a space where his fantasies took physical form. By 1989, his methods grew bolder, his confidence swelling with each unchallenged kill. Anthony Sears, 24, a promising aspiring model with a bright future, became his fifth victim, lured with promises of money and a photo session. Dahmer's experiment took a darker turn, drilling holes in his Sears' skull with a power tool, injecting acid in a futile quest to create a zombie, a living slave to serve his whims, a delusion that reflected his desperate need for control. The apartment walls hid his secret. A fridge stocked with flesh, a shelf lined with skulls, a freezer preserving hands and organs, the air thick with the hum of decay. Police visited once after a stolen item report, a neighbor's complaint about a missing radio, but Dahmer's charm turned them away. His smooth Liza shield that kept the apartment's horrors intact, the officers leaving with nothing but a handshake and a false sense of security. Neighbors like Pamela Bass, living just across the hall, recalled the stench that grew worse with each passing month, the late-night thumps that shook the floorboards, the flies that buzzed at the windows like a morbid orchestra. She knocked on his door once, concerned, but Dahmer's polite demeanor and excuse of a spoiled meal quelled her suspicions, her trust an unwitting ally to his crimes. Other residents noted the odd hours, the muffled sounds, but the city's noise, traffic sirens, the hum of daily life, drowned their concerns, a collective blindness that allowed the monster to thrive. This wasn't just murder, it was a macabre art form. Each kill a brushstroke on his canvas of death, each body a piece in a puzzle only he could see. Psychologists later pointed to this period as the solidification of his ritualistic behavior, the apartment a mirror to his fractured psyche, where isolation and obsession merged into a deadly dance. But before we move deeper, let's pause here, investigators. Consider the apartment's role, a witness to horror, a silent accomplice in the shadows. Could the neighbors have acted sooner, their knocks a call to action ignored? Could the police visit have uncovered the truth with a single search? As we delve into the next chapter, we'll see how this lair became the epicenter of a nightmare that would soon unravel. Stay with us, keep your notes ready, and let's continue this journey into the abyss. As we step out of the apartment of horrors, the echoes of Dahmer's early kills linger in the air of Case Files HQ, a grim prelude to what's to come. As we transition from the foundation of his crimes to the escalation, the build-up from 1990 to 1991, where the cannibal killer's methods sharpened and his risks grew bolder with each passing day. This period marks a turning point, a crescendo of terror that preceded his downfall, and we'll uncover it together, piece by chilling piece. By 1990, Dahmer's apartment at 924 North 25th Street was a killing machine, his techniques honed to a deadly edge that cut through life with surgical precision. His lures grew smoother. Offers of money, drinks, a place to crash, drawing in the vulnerable like moths to a flame that promised warmth but delivered death. Ernest Miller, 22, a talented musician with a voice that once filled local clubs, met his end in September 1990. Lured with a drink, his vocal cords were sliced to silence his screams, a deliberate act to keep his cries from reaching the thin walls, his biceps eaten in a grotesque ritual that marked Dahmer's descent into cannibalism, a taste he described as a way to keep them with me. David Thomas, 23, a hard-working laborer mistaken for another target, followed in March 1991, his life snuffed out by the same false promises, his body added to the growing collection in the freezer, a cold storage for his sins. Dahmer's risks escalated. He stored bodies longer, the stench growing unbearable, experimenting with acid baths to erase evidence, the apartment a laboratory of death buzzing with flies that swarmed the windows like a living shroud. A close call came in early 1991 when a victim's friend, worried about a missing companion, called the police with a detailed description, but Dahmer's charm turned them away again. His smooth lies a shield against suspicion, the officers leaving with a pat on the back and a false sense of duty fulfilled. Neighbors like Vernell Bass, Pamela's brother, complained of the stench that seeped into their homes, the buzzing flies that invaded their kitchens, the late-night thumps that shook their sleep, yet no one connected the dots, their complaints lost in the bureaucracy of a busy precinct. His obsession deepened. He drilled into skulls with a power tool, the whirring sound a constant in the night, injecting acid in a quest to create living puppets, a fantasy of control that reflected his growing detachment from reality. Psychologists later theorized this was his ultimate control fantasy. Death as a canvas, life as a toy to manipulate, a mind unraveling into madness. But before we press on, let's pause here, investigators. Consider the escalation, the boldness of his lures, the risks he took, the ignored signs from neighbors and police. Could this have been the moment to stop him, a tipping point where a deeper search might have saved lives? As we move into the next chapter, we'll witness the breaking point that should have ended it all. Stay with us, keep your focus, and let's continue this dark journey. As the escalation of Dahmer's crimes reverberates through Case Files HQ, we stand on the brink of a critical moment. As we move from the buildup of 1990 to 1991 to the breaking point, the Connor synthesumphone incident of May 1991, a tragedy that should have ended the cannibal killer's reign, but instead exposed a systemic failure that shook Milwaukee. Let's delve into this pivotal chapter together, uncovering the details that define a missed chance at justice. May 27, 1991, Connor synthesumphone, a 14-year-old boy with a bright smile and dreams of a better life, became Jeffrey Dahmer's near undoing. Drugged with a laced drink that clouded his senses, his head drilled with a power tool that left him disoriented and bleeding, he stumbled naked onto the street, a desperate escape from the apartment of horrors. Saved by Glenda Cleveland, a 56-year-old neighbor with a mother's instinct, and her daughter Sandra, who dialed 911 with urgent pleas, Conorak's survival hung by a thread. Officers John Balserzak and Joseph Gabrish arrived, but Dahmer's smooth lies, "He's my drunk boyfriend, we had a spat," convinced them, their judgment clouded by prejudice and haste. They returned Conorak to his killer, ignoring Glinda's frantic warnings, a decision that would haunt them and the city for years. Hours later, he was dead, his skull pierced again, his body added to the tally, a life snuffed out by a system's blindness. The community exploded. Protests erupted outside the 4th District Police Station, accusations of racism and negligence ringing through the streets, media swarming with headlines that branded the police as complicit. Dahmer, unshaken, killed again days later, his confidence bolstered by the escape, his apartment a fortress of impunity. This wasn't just a personal failure. It exposed a system blind to a predator, a failure rooted in institutional biases and a lack of follow-through. But let's pause here, investigators. Consider the breaking point. The missed chance, the community's cry for justice, the police's fatal error. Could this have been the moment to stop him? A turning point where vigilance might have prevailed? As we move forward, we'll see the unraveling that finally brought him down. Stay with us, reflect on this tragedy, and let's continue. As the breaking point fades into a haunting memory at Case Files HQ, we approach the end of Jeffrey Dahmer's reign. As we move from the Conorak tragedy to the unraveling, his arrest on July 22, 1991, and the chilling evidence that revealed the full extent of the cannibal killer's lair. Let's step into this moment of reckoning together, piecing together the details that brought his empire to light. July 22, 1991, Tracy Edwards, a 32-year-old man with a survivor's instinct, escaped Dahmer's clutches, handcuffs dangling from his wrist like a badge of survival, leading police officers Rolf Mueller and Robert Roth to apartment 213. They stepped inside, hit by a stench of decay that assaulted their senses, a head in the fridge staring back with lifeless eyes, 3 more skulls arranged on a bedroom shelf like macabre decor, photographs of posed corpses pinned to the walls like a gallery of death. A 57-gallon drum bubbled with acid, dissolving flesh into oblivion. A freezer held a human heart preserved in cold silence, and severed hands rested in a lobster pot, a grotesque still life. Forensic teams cataloged 11 skulls, some painted, a box of bones, and a collection of Polaroids that detailed each victim's final moments. Dahmer confessed with chilling detail. Each kill, each dismemberment, each act of cannibalism. A mind laid bare in the harsh light of interrogation. The public reeled. Media dubbed him the Milwaukee Monster, and the city grappled with the horror unveiled. But let's pause here, investigators. Consider the evidence, the scale of his collection, the precision of his planning, the horror of his confessions. What does this tell us about the depth of his depravity? As we move to the trial, we'll seek answers. Stay with us, keep your notes, and let's press on. As the evidence of Dahmer's crimes settles into the annals of Case Files HQ, we turn to the pursuit of justice. As we move from the unraveling of 1991 to the trial of 1992, a battle of sanity versus evil, and delve into the mind of the cannibal killer. Let's enter the courtroom together, seeking answers in the face of horror. February 1992, Milwaukee County Courthouse hosted Dahmer's trial, a spectacle that drew national attention. Shackled and unrepentant, he pleaded guilty but insane, claiming voices in his head drove him to kill, a defense that painted him as a victim of his own mind. Defense psychiatrist Dr. Fred Berlin argued that paraphilia, a sexual disorder, warped his psyche, turning his need for control into a compulsion to possess the dead, while prosecution's Dr. Park Dietz insisted it was calculated cruelty, a mind fully aware of its actions. 5 weeks of testimony unfolded. Tracy Edwards recounted his narrow escape. Photographs of skulls and dismembered bodies were presented. Victim family members wept in the gallery, their pain a silent accusation. The jury deliberated for 10 hours, a tense silence broken by the verdict on February 17th. Guilty on 15 counts of murder, sane, and responsible, sentencing him to 15 life terms with no parole. Psychologists debated a 1968 head injury from a fall, his mother's pills during pregnancy, or a lonely soul seeking companionship through death. But let's pause here, investigators. Consider the trial, the evidence laid bare, the mind dissected, the verdict delivered. Was this justice served, or a hollow echo in a broken system? As we approach the end, we'll see the final chapter. Stay with us, reflect deeply, and let's continue. As the trial's verdict echoes through Case Files HQ, we approach the final curtain of Jeffrey Dahmer's story. As we move from the courtroom to the end, his prison life, his death in 1994, and the lasting legacy of the Cannibal killer. Let's close this case together, reflecting on the lessons and looking to the future. In Columbia Correctional Institution, Dahmer found a strange peace amidst the bars and concrete. Baptized in 1994 by a prison minister, he turned to painting landscapes that hinted at a lost serenity, reading the Bible daily, a stark contrast to the blood-soaked past that defined him. But on November 28, 1994, Christopher Scarver, a fellow inmate with his own demons, ended it, beating Dahmer with a barbell in the gym, a brutal act fueled by rumors of Dahmer taunting him with cannibalistic jokes. Dahmer died en route to the hospital at 34, his death cheered by some as justice, mourned by families who sought answers denied by his silence. His legacy spurred police training reforms, inspired a media boom with documentaries and books, and left victim families like Rita Isbell in enduring pain, her impact statement a cry that still resonates. The apartment site at 924 North 25th Street remains an empty lot, a silent memorial to the lives lost. But before we close, let's pause here, investigators. Consider the end, the justice delivered, the lessons learned, the unanswered questions that linger. Can we stop the next monster? Or are we doomed to repeat this cycle? Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for our next investigation into the Zodiac Cipher, and join us again. Until then, keep your eyes open and your mind sharp.